Okay, American federal government. So this is the chapter on civil liberties, chapter 4. First, right off the bat, I want to distinguish the difference between civil liberties and civil rights. And in fact, I think in the 13th edition, it has civil liberties as one chapter and civil rights as another, chapter 5. And I think the newer edition might have them combined, but your test, it should have them separate. Civil liberties is one, your reading quiz, civil rights is another, so that should work out. And they really need to be separate chapters because they're two huge things. So civil liberties, you think of liberty. So you think of government not infringing on your individual liberty, your individual rights. So civil liberties is talking about individual rights, individual liberties. Civil rights is talking about equality for African Americans, for women, for LGBT. So that's really the distinction between the two, so you understand that. So when we talk about civil liberties, of course, you got to talk about the Bill of Rights, the first 10 amendments, because many of our civil liberties are enshrined in that. And the First Amendment's the big one. Congress shall make no law establishing a religion or prohibiting the free exercise thereof, freedom of speech, freedom of press, the right to assemble. That's all in the First Amendment. So it's a doozy for sure. So we're going to learn about all of those things in the Bill of Rights, and I'm not going to go through all of those. You're going to be reading about those. But perhaps more important than even the Bill of Rights is the 14th Amendment. So the 14th Amendment was passed after the Civil War, and the 14th Amendment is, first of all, it grants citizenship to everyone who's born in this country, birthright citizenship. It was originally applied to former enslaved people because they were not citizens under the Constitution. They were not human beings. They were just 3/5 of the person. So it amends the Constitution to change that so that now they are citizens. But it just says that persons born in this country. So that's birthright citizenship. Everybody born in this country is a citizen. But beyond that, too, it also grants equal protection under the law. And that has been now applied far more broadly. And it also, and this is incorporation doctrine, it incorporates the Bill of Rights, not all of them yet, but to the states, so that those laws, those Bill of Rights apply to the states. It's used to apply those to the states. And so you'll see that in there as well. Now, the problem with all these civil liberties is how far do you go? How far do the civil liberties extend? Because all rights are limited. So we have freedom of speech, but as the Supreme Court Justice said, that doesn't mean you can go and yell fire in a crowded theater and scare everyone and they trample and people are killed. Your rights are limited, but when and how do we limit rights? And we like to think of the United States as, oh, our liberties, we hold them so dear. But if you study American history, we have a long history of actually suppressing free speech and suppressing individual liberties and individual rights. And a lot of people don't want people to be allowed to express their freedom of speech, especially when it's unpopular. That's when they're most under threat, is when that speech is unpopular. And so you're going to be reading about that as well. Freedom of press is so important because the press is essential. I read the Washington Post, and their subtitle where it says Washington Post, and then under that it says democracy dies in darkness. And that's the job of the press. They shine a light on corruption. They shine a light on misdeeds within government. They inform us about wars. The press is important. And I say this because the press is very much under attack by politicians. That's nothing new because oftentimes they make politicians mad. And you see this more than ever. But the attacks go to a whole new level lately. I mean, when politicians say that the press are the enemy of the people, those are almost the exact words that Joseph Stalin used. And that they should have a right to limit what the press prints. That's crazy. Of course, the person that said that was former President Trump, who rails against the press and says they lie and everything and their agenda. And of course, the reason a lot of politicians do that is to get you to trust their word more than any others. And I'm not by any means saying that you should completely trust the press. But professional journalists do try their best to get it right. And by professional journalists, they're usually working for newspapers, they're PBS, NPR, and others, and they do a thoroughly good job of trying to inform us. And it's a very important job, one of the most important jobs in the country. So, so much, of course, when we talk about free speech and free press, there's things surrounding, for example, pornography and obscenity, and when does that become obscene and everything like that. And then you've got, I mean, this is a huge chapter, illegal searches and seizures. So the rights of the accused, the Miranda rights, you have the right to remain silent. Those are really important. I used to have students, and I can't go over the whole chapter in 10 minutes, so I'm gonna just go on. I used to have students watch a documentary on Frontline about the confessions where the police had elicited false confessions. And it helps you understand why those civil liberties are so important, because governments have a habit often of trampling on those liberties. And if you're just one individual, you're against a whole system. It is easy for them, for example, to elicit a false confession. That's why we have those protections. Because innocent until proven guilty. We don't want a system like in Saudi Arabia or Iran or China, where no, you're guilty and you're put away and never heard from again. And just often because you say something that politically offends somebody. That's why those rights are enshrined. And it's not just in this country, it's in England and France and Germany. Those rights have since also there as well. A lot of what we're talking about in this chapter and this week's assignment is the right to privacy. So in a nutshell, in the late 1960s, there were some states that banned birth control, particularly the pill. Now, if you look at the Constitution, you're not going to see anything in there about birth control or the pill. So is that protected? Well, the Supreme Court ruled in Griswold versus Connecticut that people have a right to privacy and that the government cannot infringe upon that right to privacy. And now the word privacy is not actually in the Bill of Rights. It's not actually in the Constitution, but it's called the penumbra. And that means that you can't have the other rights if you don't have privacy. And so in this case, the justices broadly interpret that so that they said, no, states can't ban birth control. And why is this important? Because that case, Griswold versus Connecticut, led to the case of Roe v. Wade. The case of Roe v. Wade, the Supreme Court said, because women have a right to privacy, people have the right to decide up until the first trimester. And there's an announcement. I'm just going to keep going because I'm 8 minutes into this. So they said during the first trimester, governments that women have a right to an abortion, and that's their choice. Now, the second and third trimester, governments could then limit, but must maintain exceptions for the health and life of the mother. Well, of course, as you know by now, about 18 months to 2 years ago, the Supreme Court, in a really dramatic decision, overturned Roe v. Wade. And that was huge. It was big. And so now, what did that mean? It meant that states were free to do what they want. So states could ban abortions or they could keep it. And in about 20 states, I've got a New York Times article that shows you where those are, have completely banned abortions, including Oklahoma. Now, Oklahoma has an exception, but for all of practical purposes, there's no exception. And I've got an article there that also shows women that who actually have very dangerous pregnancy that's life-threatening and cannot get an abortion in Oklahoma. And so your assignment is about that, because I want you to read those articles and consider that and think about where the Constitution applies, what it doesn't apply to, because this has been a game changer. Of course, those that are, and I don't like the terms pro-life and pro-choice because I think they're misleading, but those who are against abortion rights, many of them would like to see a national law to ban abortion everywhere, and they've promoted that. But of course, those who support abortion rights, for them, this was a big step back, because now in almost half the country or more, or just slightly under half the country, abortion's no longer available. So Interested to hear your comments on that. Obviously, your opinion I would never grade down on your opinion, except that it does need to be backed by reasoning, and it does need to address some of the things that is in the articles I shared with you. And as long as you do that, and link it to the Constitution, how does the Constitution apply to this, then you're going to be good. So it is something that I'm doing new this year, because this is a game-changing Supreme Court decision as far as civil liberties go. All right, that's it for this week. Thank you. Email me if you have questions.